Hello everybody and welcome back to the video. As usual, if you guys have any questions about this specific video or any questions in general, if you guys need help with anything, feel free to leave that down in the comment section down below. And also consider subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. So let's jump into it. I think for today's video, I'll just do a quick kind of like reply or response to a video request that I got a while back. I can't remember who it was or which comments it was, but someone asked me to demonstrate how to do a get callout. So a REST callout using the get request, if that makes sense. And since I didn't actually have time to prep anything, we'll just kind of, improvise a little bit, and we'll, I guess, cheat a little bit, and we'll use this Apex REST callouts trailhead real quick. And essentially, since, like I said, I didn't really prep for it or anything, so I don't really have like any endpoints that we can call. But I did notice that this nice little trailhead, well, I'll link this down in the description box below because it does a fairly decent job of explaining how to get this set up and how to do it yourself. But they also provide us with an endpoint that is public to use. So if I just copy this and open it and kind of, just go to it real quick, let me go ahead and send it right here. You'll see here that essentially, we just did a GET request to this endpoint and it returned back some JSON. So pretty useful. We can actually, use this to test our endpoint ourselves. So yeah, we'll kind of just, I guess, I'll copy this in my VS Code and, we'll kind of talk about it a bit and then we'll go from there. So yeah, let's kind of copy this. And if I wasn't clear enough already, today I'm going to just go through the get callout, and then pretty easy, or it's pretty, I think, straightforward to do the rest, but in some other video I'll cover the other ones. I just kind of want to get this video out for you guys today. So okay, yeah, let's jump into it. So I've copied this code right here, and let's jump into our VS Code. And in here I've already gone ahead and created an Apex class for us. I just called it callouts. The constructor is empty for now. And what I'm going to go ahead and do here is let's go ahead and create a public static. This will be a, yeah, we'll just leave it void. That's fine. Public static void, and then we'll do get callout will be the name of the method. And in here, we can kind of just paste the code that we took from the trailhead very quickly. So I'll go ahead and format this a bit to make it a bit more legible, and we can kind of start dissecting the code through and reading it. So to start right here, we create a new HTTP object, then that was just called HTTP. The next line over, we create a new HTTP request object, which was called request. From there, the request object, we set a few properties on it. So we set the endpoint, and that is the endpoint that you saw me go to on the in my browser, which should just return a JSON, which was, if we go back very quickly and I open it up again, we saw that it returns a key of animals with the value being a list or an array, depending on how you're looking at it, of a bunch of different animals. This one's called a majestic badger, fluffy bunny, scary bear, and chicken. So, and I don't know, I wonder if it's, yeah, it looks like it returns the same list every single time. Just so you know. Jumping back into our code, the next one is we're setting the method on our request object, and in this case, this is how we tell it that we're doing a get request. Obviously, if you were doing a post, you would change this to post or whatever is your verb or your action that you're trying to do. And then here in this line, we are doing our actual callout. So you'll see here that we do HTTP. So this is the instantiation of this object right here, and we're doing a send. And the thing that we're sending is the request that we've built up in these three lines right here. And then what we're doing is we're storing that output in a HTTP response object, which we just called response right here. And this response, it's going to have a few things for us. As you see right here in this line right here, we're doing a conditional, and essentially in the response object, we're grabbing, or we're doing a call to this method, get status code, which if it's 200, and 200 is usually used to signify that the request was a success and we got something back from the endpoint, then we're going to go ahead and do something in here. And essentially in here, all we're doing is we're just kind of like deconstructing or deserializing rather, the response that we got back and then trying to see what it is. So yeah, this response here, it's an object. It contains a lot of different things. As you can see here, it has get status code, but I would encourage you guys to look at the Salesforce docs and, actually let's go ahead and do that together. So if I go here and I just do Apex callout like so, you'll see here, and I've already gone to this many times in the past, but if we click onto it, we are in the Salesforce Apex developer guide. And so, this might, if you're kind of new to programming or Salesforce development in general, it might be a little bit intimidating, but it pretty much gives you everything you need to know about this. So let's go and click on one of these and let's just look at the HTTP classes. And I know I'm kind of just speeding through it, but you'll see here at the top that we have access to, or we can see these different classes. And the one we want to look at, I guess in particular, is the HTTP response. So if I click on that, you'll see here the HTTP response class. It's used the HTTP response class to handle the HTTP response returned by the HTTP class. So, and then here we can see all the different methods that are available on this class or the object instantiation. We can do get body is blob, so on and so forth. And you'll see here, this is the one that we use to get our status code. And in regards to status code, so if I click on this right here, I don't know what it will show us. Looks like it's not much. It doesn't really say much. It just returns the value of the status code. But when you're dealing with like HTTP, you'll have, there are many different types of codes that you get back. You can get back a 404, which is like, nothing was found, or a 200, which was, we got your request and it was valid, or it could be like a 302 or 301, which is like a redirection to some other endpoint. So, the purpose of this video isn't really to go over the protocol itself, but more so just to show how we can actually do the call out ourselves or the get call out ourselves, and then kind of point you guys to, the docs to learn more about it, as well as, this trailhead as well, which I think is pretty good. So anyways, that tangent aside, once we are here, if we're basically going to check if we got back a successful request or response rather, then we can go ahead and start to deserialize that JSON that we got back. And in here, what they're doing, this line right here, you'll see they're calling the JSON object and they're doing deserialized untyped. And what they're passing in here is just the body, or they're getting the response. We're going to the response object and they're calling the get body method, which will, get the JSON that's stored in the request of the response body. And essentially they're casting it to a map of string to objects. And we're storing that in this results map, which is a key string and then object, that's the values. So once we have that, then the next thing they're doing is, in this case, this is a very simple example. They already know that this JSON is going to contain a key of animals, and the value that that key of animals has is just a list of objects right here, and that's being stored as as an animals variable of list objects. So I hope that kind of makes sense. Essentially, once that's done, we now got the output of that JSON stored in this animals list of objects, and all they're going to do is just iterate through each individual element in that list, and they're just outputting it to the console. So kind of to like demonstrate what that looks like, or rather before demonstrating it, let's jump back into the actual point right here. Essentially, this whole thing was deserialized, and here is our key of animals. This key of animals contains this list or array, and each one is a, in this case, the code just calls it an object, but in reality it's a string, but you can't really assume that sometimes. But here is a string. This is the first element, or sorry, here's the first element, here's the second element, so on and so forth. And essentially what that for loop is doing is once we have that animals list stored in or animals list declared and instantiated, the for loop is just going to iterate through each one and just print that out to the console. So hopefully that makes sense. I know I'm kind of rushing through it today, but I will go back and make more videos in the future covering all the other HTTP verbs as well. So going back here, that is basically what I explained here. And then once we're done, that's pretty much it. So on our end, that's the code. I can kind of save it and then, just push it up to my org. And again, I think I always kind of point this out when I'm working within VS Code. If you guys aren't familiar on how I got this set up, I basically just set up my local environment to be VS Code and connect back to my Salesforce Trailhead org. I have made a video in the past on how to get all this set up, which I'll leave a link down in the description box below as well. But what I'll do for now, assuming that we didn't make any errors in copying our code, and I think it should be fine. Let's try to deploy source to org and see if we get any errors. So deploying source to org, and it looks like we deployed successfully. And now before we can, basically what I'm going to do just to test this out is probably just do like execute, Apex Anonymous, and then see what we get back as our in our system.debug. But before we do that, we actually have to whitelist this endpoint right here, or else we'll get an error basically saying that Salesforce our code isn't authorized to call this endpoint, and that's just kind of like a security mechanism. And actually, before we do that, I want to say this org doesn't have this endpoint set up. So let me go ahead and I'll even show you guys how to do execute anonymous in VS Code. If you navigate to scripts and then Apex, you'll see here I already created a callout.apex file. But if you're opening this up for the first time and you create your own project, using a manifest or whatever in VS Code, you'll likely just have this file, the hello.apex. And here it basically tells you to use, .apex files to store anonymous apex, and you can execute them, using these commands right here, which is kind of nice. So as an example, if you wanted to just execute this class, I know that's not the point of this video or anything, but just to kind of show you guys, type in the command sfdx, and then we'll execute anonymous apex right here. You'll see here it ran, and now what we have in our output is this stuff right here. So yeah, that's basically how we can run the code ourselves. So yeah. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and close this right here, and we'll open up our callouts.apex, and essentially just to get this code to fire, all I'm going to do is just since I define this method get callout as a static, I kind of just do a callouts.get callout. And then because we have our debugs, we should be able to see that in our console right here as output. So I'll just do callouts.get callout right here, which was already a suggestion by VS Code. Look for the command ourselves, so sfdx, and then we'll do execute apex anonymous with currently selected text. That's fine. Right here, the code ran successfully, and let's see what we got as our output. So it looks like I think I do have this code defined, but let's see. So let's scroll up a little bit, and yeah, you'll see right here, receive the following animals: majestic badger, fluffy bunny, scary bear, and chickens. And if we go back to our code, just to see right here, you'll see here, this is the first system.debug that we did, which is right here. And then since we iterated through the for loop for that list of objects, we got one line for each of those animals right here. And since I guess I don't remember whitelisting this endpoint, but I guess I had already done that in this org. I will show you guys how to whitelist it if it's not already. So for that, we'll have to jump into our actual org itself. Okay, so once we are in our org, what you want to do is you want to go to your setup. And then from setup, using the quick find, you should be able to search, I believe it's called remote site settings. So we click on that right here. And we'll see right here. I already have this defined because I guess I did this a few years ago, which is probably why I don't remember it. You'll see here that we have this one set up. But if this wasn't set up, what you would want to do is you would click this new remote site button. And right here, you would, give it a name. So in this case, it would be like, the animals URL or whatever you want to name it. The URL itself, what it would be is, if we go back to the code right here, it would be basically all of this right here without the /animal. So basically you want to get just the URL itself without any of the forward slashes. And I forget what the correct terminology is. Basically just the domain itself without any of the subdomains or any of the forward slash paths. I think that's what they're called. And so basically it would look like that. And you might want to make sure it would be active, and then you would click on save. And that would ensure that, you're basically telling Salesforce that it's okay to call this endpoint, it's been vetted or whatever. But essentially what it would look like once you create it would be basically this. You can see it's active. I gave it a description, I guess, at the time. There's the URL, and I guess I did modify it or create it at this point, 2019, so it's been a while. Without that, and I guess I'll, for now, I'll kind of just delete it just to kind of show you guys. So I'll delete it so it no longer exists. So I go back to here and we do callout again. So I'll run it one more time. Execute anonymous apex. The code ran. Let's go ahead and go towards it. You'll see here now we have slightly different outputs. You'll see we got a system.callout exception, unauthorized endpoint. Please go to, and it even tells you, how to authorize that endpoint. But that would be the error you would get if you hadn't authorized that endpoint. And another thing I wanted to show that I completely forgot until I started to edit this video was on how to, get this response body back and then deserialize it using a class or Apex class itself. You'll see here that I created this Apex class called Callout JSON wrapper. And right now it only has, an inner class of animals. And inside of that, I have a variable or a list of strings called animals as well. And, essentially I'm going to use this class with this inner class to kind of represent that JSON that we're going to get from the endpoint. If you see here, I called this class or this variable animals, and it's a list of strings, which is basically mimicking the endpoint right here, right? Which is, a key of animals with a list of strings inside right here. So using this JSON representation Apex class and some more code, you'll see here that I am grabbing the callouts JSON wrapper animals class, and we're basically instantiating that. I'm calling this animals payload, which will contain our payload. And then we're doing stuff right here. Essentially, we're going to use the deserialize method on the JSON object. What we're passing in is still the response get body. It's pretty similar to this code I commented on right here, except this time it's not deserialize untyped, it's deserialize. And then what we're telling it is to use the class definition of the animals inner class on the callouts JSON wrapper Apex class. So hopefully that makes sense, but essentially the result of that is that we're using our Apex class, which represents the JSON to deserialize the payload we're getting from the endpoint. And then here, since I'm pretty sure that the JSON does deserialize, when it does its thing, it essentially deserializes it into like a generic object. We want to basically typecast it to the specific type, which is just the animals inner class of the callouts JSON wrapper, and then we're storing that as this animals payload variable. Once we have that, you'll see here I just did a simple system.debug to just kind of like output the entire thing. So you'll see here it's this line right here in my output. You'll see this is the animals payload, and then what we got inside of it is this animals list. You'll see here is the list itself. It contains those values that we get from the endpoint. And then what I'm doing here is I'm going to do a for loop. What I'm doing is I'm going to the animals payload object, and then I'm grabbing the animals a list from it. So it's basically like saying, you know, go into this right here, and then basically iterate through these values right here, and, you know, print them to the debug. So we have here, you know, here's the first one, second one, third, and fourth. So just kind of demonstrating, you know, how you can do that using an Apex class. Not a big, you know, not really necessary for this simple example, but just wanted to show another way of deserializing our JSON. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for today. I know this video might seem a bit perhaps lower quality than what I usually try to put out, but I'm kind of trying to get into the habit of, you know, posting more regularly, at least one video a week. So I do have plans to kind of start doing that. And in fact, what I'm planning to start doing probably like in the next 2 weeks or so is I got this idea from one of the comments I got while interacting with one of you guys about perhaps doing like a video series on like Salesforce developer basics, which I think I kind of started doing a while ago, but I wasn't really sure how to structure it. And I think what I'll do is I'll really go, you know, from like the absolute basics, you know, starting with like what a variable is, and, you know, lists and maps and for loops and classes and methods and all that good stuff. So that's what I'm planning to do. But let me know if you guys are actually interested in that, or if you guys want to see any other type of content. Like I said, I'm going to try to start posting one video a week. So that will be the goal. But yeah, until next time, I'll catch you guys later.